Hello everyone, Christian here, and it's time for the annual My Best Catches Trackside from 2025. It is My Best of Railfanning 2025 edition. This past year was a huge success for the channel. Building on the momentum I established in 2024, 2025 we saw growth in viewership, subscribers, and everything in between. I went on bigger trips, and I had my favorite year yet since 2018. A massive thank you goes out to everyone who subscribed. If you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button for more train videos in 2026. For now, let us look back at the best moments from 2025, and hopefully this fits into one video like last year. The first adventure of 2025, I kicked off the year with the Reading and Northern Railroad for their first ever winter Iron Horse Rambles. Led by the Railroad's 2102, it had been nearly 2 years since I had chased a Reading to Jim Thorpe trip, and I knew I couldn't miss this. In 2025, I was originally planning on filming more of the 2102. This engine is closer to me than most, and I always feel I don't film it as often as I should. I've never filmed mainline steam in the winter before, with ice on the ground, which gave the beautiful illusion of snow. Aside from the snowstorm on the drive home, it was a spectacular way to start the year with the world's loudest operational steam locomotive, 2102. thing I'll admit I lacked on this year was getting some modern rail action. Usually every year I make 1 to 2 videos, and I always pay attention to all the local tracker Facebook groups, and I try to go out for heritage units. This year I didn't really get a chance to do that. I usually prioritize stuff like heritage units, special power, rare power, all that fun stuff that you see coming down the CSX or NS mainline in my area. I only managed this year to go out 3 times. This one was filmed in March, and my intention was to go out a few more times than what I did. I would kick it off on early in March, and I caught the Norfolk and Western Heritage Unit 8103, and later in March 4720. I kept pushing this video back, wanting to get out there and film more and more of it because I thought it was too short. I never found the time to complete it, and I finally released it in May. March was supposed to be quiet. Nothing was supposed to happen. But knowing that Southern 630 was approaching its last operational year before its 1472-day overhaul, I wanted to get one final video of it on the Missionary Ridge Local. I saw the videos and photos from the first weekend, saw the show it was putting on, knowing that it was the last year. I had decided I really wanted to get one more adventure down there with Southern 630 on the Missionary Ridge Local. And at that point, I wasn't sure about the June doubleheader, which eventually I did not make. An hour after leaving for Tennessee, I found out that their diesel NC and St. L 710 would be running instead of 630 due to some issues. My backup plan was to see the SS United States that weekend, but a friend's call changed everything. As I was an hour into the trip and could easily turn around, a friend of mine called me up and asked me if I wanted to go to Strasburg. That day, they had completed a successful test run with 90. We both realized we were not going to get 90 operational, but we did want to go and film steam. So after figuring out plans with another friend, I made the mistake of skipping to go see the SS United States. We would turn around and I drove to Strasburg. Of all the adventures that gets overlooked this year, it was this one. It was the most relaxing, and I always love going to the Strasburg Railroad. 89 was operating the trains, and 89 is the one engine I do not get enough video of at Strasburg. So this was probably our most relaxing adventure of the year. We had a lot of fun. One of the first events planned for 2025 in December of 2024, it was announced that Steam in the Valley was returning. After a 3-year absence, the closest mainline Steam event was back in the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad with Nickel Plate Road 765. I had to go. This year, what was different was they did not run the passenger trains on Sunday down to Akron. That is my favorite part of the line. But regardless, this opened up many opportunities to focus on the northern end of the line, which I needed. Unfortunately, on Friday evening, we got hit with a monsoon. It hit literally about a half hour before the train departed. Probably what damaged this video camera. And unfortunately, it flooded the valley, and the first 2 trips on Saturday were canceled. And at that point, it was unsure what was going to happen. However, the rain would clear, and the Saturday evening trip would go as planned, and Sunday would be a nice sunny day in the valley. I truly forget how incredible of a show 765 puts on in the valley. It remains one of my favorite places to see steam. year's ferry move to Cuyahoga Valley would be different. There was rumors for many months that it would be taking the Wheeling and Lake Erie. They were nothing but rumors until the day of, and they did run down the Wheeling and Lake Erie. It was then told to me, hey, you should come out Mother's Day weekend that Saturday, as they will be running private trips on the Wheeling and Lake Erie. I knew I wanted to go see this, as 765 would probably run track speed, and I was looking forward to seeing 765 operate in somewhere other than Cuyahoga Valley and Indiana Rail Experience. I like both venues, but it was neat to see a change in pace. These specials would be ran out of Brewster, Ohio. While there was really no chase, it was pick a spot and enjoy 765 operating at track speed. It was nice to see it operating at track speed again. And it would also wear a Wheeling and Lake Erie Berkshire 5-chime whistle. Traveled for Memorial Day weekend since 2023. This year I made sure to film Steam in my home state. For the first time since 2017, the Arcade Attica 18 pulled the Memorial Day weekend trains. Saturday started out with, again, harsh weather, but Sunday and Monday turned out to be warm spring days. 765 definitely was the engine I focused on the most this year, and that wasn't even originally the plan. It was almost like 2018. Having a convention in Columbus a few days prior, I figured it'd be the perfect time to chase the Tri-State Steam Scenic again. As usual, this year, the first day brought rain. It was the first time that I have seen overcast with the Tri-State Steam Scenic excursion. The second day was the best day, which is what will featured heavily in this compilation. The 765 used another guest whistle that day. It was the Reading 6 chime that will be used on the Reading 2100 American Freedom Train 250, which was used for most of the day on Sunday. I also finally got to film the Nickel Plate Road 358 leading a train, which was high on my list. I have wanted to see the 358 in operation since it returned last year. after Tri-State was another early planned adventure for 2025. After filming A Day Out with Thomas last year to commemorate the 40th anniversary of my favorite TV show as a kid, I wanted to film it again this year, except this time I wanted to film it in June to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Railway series. Along that, I was also hoping that at the same time the Reading 2102 would be operating the Taconic Iron Horse Ramble, as it operated it around the same time last year. The Strasburg 90 recently had returned from its 1472-day overhaul, and it was put in its 1990s paint scheme. And this is the best 90 has looked since the Steam Strikes Back photo charter in 2020. It landed the regular passenger trains on Friday when we filmed The Day Out with Thomas, and it looked magnificent. The following day we would chase the 2102 on what is tied to be my favorite 2102 chase yet, as it led the Taconic Iron Horse Ramble. My only gripe with this excursion is if the sun is out, almost every shot is backlit, minus a few. Beyond that, this is my favorite part of the Reading and Northern line. The day after the 4th of July, my main plan was to film New York and Lake Erie's newest diesel, the 636. However, we were instead treated to a triple header featuring their 2 classic FPA locomotives. While not the day we were originally planning on, I can't complain as I got a triple header on the New York and Lake Erie Railroad. This is also the railroad the Natural and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles was filmed on. Since 2019, I finally got to see the big boy again. I missed the trip to the Midwest last year, as it happened during the 2 worst weeks for me to try and take vacation. So this year, I had made it a priority to go see the engine if it pulled a Denver excursion, which it did. I flew out on Wednesday, and I would start filming the Georgetown Loop Railroad. I don't remember the reason why, but in 2018, this was on the list, but I feel they were not operating around the time we were out there. On Thursday, I caught the 4014 running from Cheyenne to Denver. I would catch it again on Saturday, leading the return trip from Denver to Cheyenne. This is the best I have heard the big boy work. It sounded amazing both days climbing those grades. Afterwards on Thursday, we drove up to the Transcon north in Wyoming to catch some mainline UP action. On Friday, we would return to the Georgetown Loop. This section features our best takes from that whole trip. And instead of including static steam train videos this year, I am only going to include a still of what we saw static-wise. engine I was truly not expecting to see this year was one of my favorite operational Mikados, Line 1003. This particular event popped up just a few weeks beforehand. I was planning on attending last year's photo charter, but it was canceled in September, so I made alternative plans and went down south. So when I heard about this excursion, I made sure to attend. The 1003 would pull its usual consist, nothing really too special, and would lead the train tender first to Horicon, then shove the train to Burnett, and it would do photo run-bys on the trip back to Hartford. Every autumn is busy for me. It is my favorite time to chase trains. The last 2 autumns, I've really tried to keep myself limited to what I did. This year, I went all out this autumn. I will not be doing that again in 2026. I do not plan on being out every weekend in October. In my opinion, the fall time is my favorite time to chase trains. The foliage, the colors, combined with the cooler temperatures, it makes for the best time, in my personal opinion, for train photography. This fall was packed. Kick things off in the state of 10,000 Lakes with Milwaukee Road 261 on its first excursion since 2022 that wasn't North Pole Express trips. While both days the trips would run out of Chahasson. The first day, the locomotive went down the Minnesota Prairie Line. The second day, it would stay on the typical route, and it went all the way west to Sumter. This engine is truly one of the most underrated steam locomotives, in my opinion. the Sunday of Columbus Day, I chased my home state steam train, the Arcade Attica 18, on a day of its fall foliage excursions. Weekend in October, which really made this October packed, was I had to go to another convention. And originally I was just going to drive down to the convention and head home. However, it was announced the last weekend of September that the New York, Susquehanna, and Western 142 would be returning to operation after an 8-year, 1472-day rebuild. This used to be my favorite Chinese steam locomotive, and I wanted to finally see this locomotive in operation. So the Sunday after the convention, I would drive east to New Jersey to chase 142. This was my favorite Chinese steam engine until I saw the 6988. And finally getting to see it operate was fantastic. weekend of October. I was originally planning on seeing the 1702 with the Norfolk and Western 611, but the website was updated a week beforehand to say diesels would be pulling all the trains, and after checking into that, I decided to push back the 611 Adventure by a day. Now, of course, as usual, the 1702 did operate that Thursday, but anyhow, I can't complain. After a 2-year break, the 611 would return to the mainline with the Shenandoah Valley Limited. Now, while there's various different mainline experiences that I was able to see this year, the 2 true mainline steam excursions I saw this year was 4014 and 611. While it was just past peak foliage, the 611 put on the best show I've seen the engine put on yet. Running at track speed over the former CNL on Virginia Scenic Railroad, this is definitely one of the best steam shows in the country. I made my way back down to the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum the first weekend in November to close out the fall foliage season for the last weekend of operation with the Southern 630. On Saturday, I chased the Southern 4501 on the Somerville Steam Special. The weather was perfect on this day, and it had been 7 years since I had filmed 4501 on a Somerville Steam Special, and 5 years since I made a solo 4501 video. On Sunday was Southern 630's last day in operation. So they ran a Somerville Steam doubleheader special down to Somerville, which they typically run 2 a year since the return of these specials. The day was dreary. I can't say it was one of the worst rainstorms I've ever battled, but it was dreary the first half of the day. Then it cleared up, then it hailed. Then we appeared to be beating the storm coming back into the area. Then it rained again. And then we literally lucked out. It wasn't as good as the Somerville Steam special I filmed last year, in my personal opinion, but it was one of my favorite videos. And to see Southern 630 on its swan song before its 1472 day was great. At the time of editing this, I wasn't sure whether I was going to release this as a quick clip or if I would decide to head out trackside and catch some snow trains, as we got a lot of snow in December. Or this might honestly be the debut of this clip. On Sunday, November 23rd, I got word that the Amtrak 130 Phase 2 Heritage Unit was leading the Lakeshore Limited. It has appeared on this train several times over the past few years, but I have never found a time for me to go out and see it. And I realized this was finally my chance to see this engine. Unfortunately, right as the train came into view, I realized I left my video camera's SD card at home and had to use the one from my DSLR for this clip instead. Fun times. And lastly, my last adventure of 2025 would be the first weekend in December. When the Polar Express was released in 2004, it was released a few days after my 13th birthday. I remember seeing the trailer the year beforehand, I want to say when I saw the movie Elf, and was excited that one of my favorite Christmas stories was going to be made into a movie. I was excited and couldn't wait to see the movie, but by the time the movie was released, I was already a teenager. Other movies had my interest, and other things had my interest to where I remember it coming out, but I never really went out of my way to go and see it. Over the years, I saw parts of it, but I could never convince myself to sit through the movie. That being said, it has become a tradition for me to go out and film the locomotive that inspired both the book and the movie, the Père Marquette 1225, during its North Pole Express season, typically to close out the year. In 2024, I plan to celebrate the film's 20th anniversary, but unfortunately issues developed with the 1225 that sidelined the engine for a year. Repairs took place over this time, over the course of the past year, and they were completed by the first weekend in December. To add to that, the system came through the week prior and there was a nice layer of snow on the ground. So I was finally able to see the real Polar Express operating with snow. Despite some rough roads and ending up with a rental sedan over an SUV, this turned out to be one of my favorite adventures of the year. If anything, this was probably my most chaotic. And with that, thank you all for your incredible support you've given my channel in 2025. I hope you all stick around and stay tuned as I head into my 10th year. By all accounts, it sounds like it is going to be a great year. Stay tuned for more steam trains.